Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. My daughter sold Pops, orchard, and locked me out. Then the weather station camera exposed her deed. My daughter sold Pops, orchard while I was away, changed the locks, and told everyone I was losing my mind. She thought the land was already hers. But on the hill above the apple rows, one weather station camera had recorded the truth. The first thing I noticed was not the lock, it was the sign. For sale had been hammered into the front fence of Pops, orchard with 4 silver nails, crooked enough to insult every man in my family who had ever held a level. Beneath it, a smaller red sticker had been slapped across the post, sold pending transfer. The letters looked too clean against the old cedar boards, too loud against the rows of apple trees Pops had planted by hand before my daughter was even born. I stood in the gravel drive with my hospital discharge papers still folded in my coat pocket. The nurse had told me to go home, rest, take the antibiotics, and let my daughter help me for a while. I had almost laughed. Did not help unless there was a receipt, a witness, or an advantage. Still, she was my daughter. A father keeps making room for disappointment long after the house is full. My keys did not fit the gate anymore. I tried the brass one, then the square-headed one Pops had given me when I turned 16. Both stopped dead in the new lock. It was a thick black padlock, still shiny, the kind a contractor buys in bulk. Hanging from it was a paper tag with one word printed in block letters, authorized. Behind the fence, the orchard looked unchanged and completely stolen. Morning frost silvered the grass. The packing shed leaned at the same tired angle. The old weather station on the hill blinked its little red eye above the pear trees, measuring wind and rain like it had since Pops' hands went stiff with arthritis. But the kitchen curtains in the farmhouse were different. White, expensive. Not the faded blue ones my wife, Nora, had sown during the year we lost most of the peach crop. I called. She answered on the 3rd ring with music in the background, and her voice already sharpened. "Dad, you shouldn't be there. I live here." A pause, not guilt, calculation. "You used to live there," she said softly, the way people speak in waiting rooms. "We talked about this. The doctors said you needed stability. The doctors told me to rest at home. You get confused when you're tired." I looked at the sold sticker again, and my hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. "Who changed the locks?" "Dean arranged it. We had to protect the property." "From who?" Another pause. This one had a smile behind it. "From you hurting yourself." The gravel under my shoes seemed to tilt. A week in the hospital for pneumonia had turned my own daughter into the voice at the gate telling me I had become a danger to my father's land. Pops used to say that a thief never starts by stealing things. A thief starts by changing what everybody calls those things. They call theft management. They call cruelty concern. They call a locked gate safety. A truck rumbled up behind me. Dean stepped out wearing a pressed vest and that polished charity smile he used at church auctions. He looked at my hospital bracelet, then at the fence, then at me. "Daniel," he said, "not Dad, not Sir. You really shouldn't be here alone." I slid my phone into my pocket, opened the gate. He looked almost regretful. "I can't do that." The words were gentle. His hand rested on the new lock like it belonged to him. That was when I understood the sign was not a mistake. It was an announcement. While I lay coughing through nights in a hospital bed, my daughter and her husband had not just visited the orchard. They had taken possession of the story, and if I wanted my home back, I would first have to prove I was still sane enough to own it. Arrived 20 minutes later in a cream-colored SUV with the orchard logo newly printed on the door. "Family Orchard Est, 1958. Under the name she had added a slogan I had never seen before, a legacy reimagined. Pops would have spit into the dirt if he had seen that. He had hated slogans. "If the apples are good," he used to say, "the tongue will advertise." My daughter stepped out wearing a wool coat that cost more than our first tractor. Her hair was pinned back, her eyes red enough for witnesses but dry enough for business. Behind her came 2 strangers, a woman with a tablet and a man with a folder. They stood near the SUV like court reporters waiting for a confession. "Dad," said, spreading her arms like I was a child found wandering beside a road. "Please don't make this harder." I asked who changed the locks. Dean gave the strangers a meaningful glance, took one careful step closer. "We did, under the authority you gave me." "I gave you no authority. You signed the transfer packet." My stomach hardened. "What packet?" The woman with the tablet looked at me with rehearsed pity. "Mister, I'm from South County Family Services. Your daughter contacted us after several episodes of erratic behavior." "Episodes?" Swallowed theatrically. "The stove left on, the missing cash box, the night you drove to the cemetery and forgot why you were there." I remembered that night. I had gone because it was Nora's birthday and the grocery store had been out of the yellow tulips she liked, so I drove 3 towns over for them. Had called twice while I was at the grave. I had not answered because I had been talking to my wife. That was not confusion, that was grief. Dean opened his folder. "We have concerns documented." "You have lies documented." His face tightened. The man with the folder clicked his pen, lowered her voice. "Dad, please, this is exactly what we warned them about. That was the trap. If I got angry, they would call it proof. If I stayed quiet, they would call it decline. The orchard gate stood between us like a witness no one wanted to hear. Behind, through the bars, I could see the old farmhouse porch. A new keypad had been mounted beside the front door. My wife's rocking chair was gone. "What did you sell?" I asked. Blinked. "We didn't sell anything." I pointed to the sign. Dean answered before she could. "Technically, we accepted a preliminary purchase offer for part of the acreage. The house and the main barn are still under review." Part of the acreage. The phrase hit me worse than if he had said the whole orchard. Pops had laid out those rows according to sun and slope, not survey lines. You could not cut 20 acres away without cutting the breath out of the rest. You had no right. His face changed then, the daughter vanished, and the woman who had practiced this in mirrors stepped forward. "I had every right. You made me medical power of attorney for hospital decisions, and you made me executor in the draft estate plan." "Draft," I said, "not signed." Dean's mouth curled. "Actually, Daniel, a newer version was signed." The man with the folder slid a paper from its sleeve, but he did not hand it to me. He held it at a distance, just far enough for me to see the signature at the bottom. My signature, or something wearing my name. The letters were slanted wrong, too smooth. No tremor where my hand always caught on the D since the saw accident. Whoever had me had studied my checks, not my scars. Watched my face, waiting for the explosion. I gave her nothing. Instead, I looked past them all, up toward the hill. The weather station blinked red again against the pale sky. Pops had installed that camera after coyotes started breaking into the chicken runs. It faced the gate, the packing shed, and half the farmhouse porch. Had forgotten about it because had never cared about anything that did not flatter her. I turned back to Dean. "You should have opened the gate." They did not let me inside that day. Dean said the buyer had requested no disturbance on the property before closing. The word buyer slid through my ribs like cold wire. A buyer meant my daughter had moved beyond threats and into signatures. A buyer meant somebody somewhere had paid money to stand between me and my father's trees. I drove to Miller's because I could not go home and could not stay at the gate without giving the spectacle she wanted. The waitress, Patty, set coffee in front of me without asking. She had known me since I was young enough to steal pie crust scraps from her mother's kitchen. "You look like somebody dug up a grave and sold the dirt," she said. "Close." The whole town knew before I finished half a cup. That is the cruelty of small places. News travels fast, but truth walks with a limp. By noon, 3 people had come by the booth to say they were sorry, had to step in. One woman touched my shoulder and told me, "It takes love to make hard choices for a parent." I wanted to ask her how much love it took to put a red-souled sticker on a man's life while he was on oxygen. Instead, I let her keep her idea of kindness. At 1 o'clock, a black pickup parked outside A man in a navy coat stepped in, looked around once, and found me immediately. He had the shine of someone used to being welcomed by people who needed money. His hair was silver at the temples, his shoes too clean for our town. "Mister," he said, "I'm Brent, development." I did not shake his hand. He sat anyway. "I understand this is emotional. Then you understand less than you think." He smiled as if I had entertained him. "Your daughter assured us the family was aligned." "My daughter lied." His smile thinned. "She provided documentation. So does a magician." Brent opened a leather folder and turned it toward me. Maps, aerial shots, boundaries drawn in red. The orchard had been sliced into sections with labels like North Parcel, Event Lawn, Parking Expansion, Heritage Market. They were not buying the orchard to keep it alive. They were buying the view. Luxury cabins among old apple rows, weddings under the pears. A tasting room in Pop's packing shed where Dean could pour cider and call theft history. "My father planted those trees," I said. "And that story is part of the value," Brent replied. That sentence told me everything about him. He did not see the orchard as land, fruit, work, weather, or debt. He saw it as texture, a customer experience. Pop's back pain was rustic charm. Nora's jam labels were brand assets. My hospital bed was unfortunate timing. I pushed the map back. "There will be no sale." "Your daughter indicated you might react this way." "Did she?" "She said you were struggling with paranoia." Patty stopped wiping the counter. I saw her eyes move from Brent to me. "She also said," he continued, lowering his voice, "that any confrontation from you should be considered part of a documented cognitive pattern." There it was, the cage, neatly built. If I fought, I confirmed the story. If I did not fight, they signed my land away. I stood slowly, using the table because pneumonia had left my legs hollow. Brent stood too, not out of respect, but because men like him think height is an argument. "You ever work an orchard?" I asked. "No." "You know what happens when a branch looks dead in February?" He frowned. "Most fools cut it off." Pops waited. He said winter makes living things look finished. I leaned close enough for him to smell the coffee on my breath. "You're looking at me in February." For the first time, Brent looked uncertain. I left and drove to the one person in town who had hated my stubbornness long enough to trust it. Bell, the lawyer who had handled Nora's estate and once called me the most exhausting honest man in the county. Bell's office sat over the old pharmacy, up a staircase narrow enough to make every client question their life choices. She was 71, wore red reading glasses on a chain, and kept a ceramic bulldog on her desk with a sign that read "Bite first, bill later." Nora used to say was what happened when God gave a librarian a hunting license. She listened without interrupting while I told her about the lock, the sign, the forged signature, its witness parade, and the man from. She did not gasp. She did not curse. She took notes in block letters on a yellow pad, then set the pen down. "Show me the document." "They wouldn't let me hold it." "Of course they wouldn't." She leaned back. "A forged signature is useful until the person you forged gets to compare it." "I know it wasn't mine." "I believe you. Courts enjoy proof more than belief." "I have the weather station." Her eyes sharpened. "Pop's Hill camera. You remember it." "I remember your father making me stand in the rain because he wanted to demonstrate night vision." A corner of her mouth moved. "Does it still record?" "I think so." "Think is not a strategy, Daniel." My face, my skin still smelled faintly of hospital soap. It blinked this morning. "That means power, not storage." The old unit saved clips to a drive in the pump house. "Can you access the pump house?" "No, new locks." Her pen against the bulldog's head. "Then we need legal access before they erase anything. If they remember it exists." Never build a case on your opponent's incompetence. It's satisfying, but judges dislike it. She pulled a form from a drawer. "First, we file a notice disputing transfer authority. Second, we request emergency injunctive relief. Third, we demand copies of every document used to claim you granted control." I stared at the words on the form. Injunctive relief sounded clean and calm. Nothing about it held the taste of standing outside your own gate while your daughter explained your life to strangers. "What if they close before we stop it?" His face went flat. Then we fight. There was a knock. Her assistant opened the door, uncomfortable. Is downstairs. My daughter had followed me. Stood, do not speak. I'm her father. Then you are emotionally compromised and therefore likely to say something stupid. She pointed to the chair. Sit. Entered wearing concern like perfume. Dean followed, carrying a folder thick enough to feel proud of itself. Behind them came Brent, who pretended surprise at seeing me. Dad said, you scared us when you drove off. Stepped between us, you must be the daughter. Blinked, and this is a family matter. Excellent, I charge more for those. Held out her hand. Documents. Dean smiled. We're not here for conflict. You changed locks on a disputed property while the owner was hospitalized. Conflict arrived before you parked. Brent cleared his throat. There are commercial timelines involved. Turned to him, then hire faster lawyers. His cheeks flushed. Dad is not well. We have medical concerns. Medical concerns do not convey land. He signed. Then you'll provide the original. Dean's fingers tightened on the folder. We only have certified copies at the moment. Smiled without warmth. People with originals say original. People with problems say at the moment. Looked at me then, and for the first time since the gate, anger broke through the performance. It was not sadness. It was not fear for me. It was fury that I had stopped playing the sick old man in her script. You're embarrassing yourself, she whispered. No, said, he's hiring counsel. The room became very still. Dean started to speak, but his phone buzzed. He checked it, and a shadow crossed his face. Noticed, so did I. What is it? She asked. He slipped the phone into his pocket. Nothing. But I had seen the message preview before he turned the screen away. Weather unit still online. Filed before sunset. By 6, had been that any closing on the orchard carried a dispute and possible fraud claim. By 7, had posted online about the heartbreak of protecting aging parents from themselves. She did not name me, but she did not have to. Half the town commented with praying hands. The other half watched silently, which in our town meant they were waiting to see who bled first. I slept at the Pine Motor Lodge in a room that smelled of bleach and old carpet. Sleep came in pieces. Every time a truck passed on the road, I saw the orchard gate again. Every time the heater clicked, I heard his voice telling strangers I was confused. At 3 in the morning, I remembered the pump house key. Not the one on my ring. The spare Pops had hidden after he caught me and my brother sneaking cider out of the cold room in 1979. He had not punished us. He had made us clean bins for 2 weekends, then showed me the false bottom inside the birdhouse nailed to the north fence post. A lock keeps honest people honest, Pops had said. A hidden key keeps family from being stupid forever. At dawn, I drove to the orchard and parked half a mile away near the creek. Mist lay low between the trees. My chest burned from walking, but anger is a kind of oxygen when the lungs forget their job. The north fence had not changed, and Dean had replaced the gate lock, the farmhouse keypad, and probably every door they could boast about. But no one had noticed the birdhouse because it was ugly, weathered, and full of spider webs. I upped the false floor with my pocket knife. The key fell into my palm, black with rust, and more beautiful than any coin. I moved through the orchard like a trespasser in my own childhood. The trees stood bare, their branches reaching into the fog. I touched the trunk of the first Honeycrisp Pops had grafted and whispered an apology. It felt ridiculous and necessary. The pump house sat behind the hill, half hidden by blackberry canes. The new padlock on its door was cheap. The old side panel, however, still had the warped latch Pops refused to replace because, in his words, a thief looks at doors, not laziness. I slid the key into the side lock. It turned with a reluctant click. Inside, the air smelled of damp concrete, dust, and oil. The weather station receiver sat on a shelf above the pump controls, its green light steady. A small screen glowed with date, temperature, wind speed. Beneath it was the storage drive in a gray metal case. My hands shook as I connected the old monitor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, showed static, and filled with the orchard gate. The camera had recorded. I almost laughed. Instead, I sat on an overturned bucket and let my forehead rest against my hands. Pops, ugly, stubborn, overbuilt system had outlived him, outsmarted my daughter, and waited in the dark like a witness with perfect memory. There were thousands of clips, motion events by date, gate, packing shed, farmhouse porch, pump house path. Most were deer, delivery trucks, wind-bent branches. I scrolled backward to the week I entered the hospital. On the second night, at 11:48 p.m., Dean's truck appeared at the gate. He stepped out with flashlights. Dean had a crowbar, carried a banker's box. They did not look like worried children checking on property. They looked like people who already knew which crime they came to finish. I opened the clip. The audio was poor at first, wind hissing across the microphone. Then's voice rose, clear as a blade. "If he gets better, we need it signed before he comes home." Dean said, "Then stop crying about it and copy the damn signature." I watched the clip 3 times before I called, not because I doubted it, but because part of me wanted the fourth viewing to become less real. It did not. His voice stayed sharp. Dean's shadow stayed bent over the gate. The banker's box stayed tucked against my daughter's hip, like a baby she loved more than me. Answered on the first ring, "Tell me you found something." "I found them." There was no triumph in her silence. Good lawyers know evidence is not healing. It is a knife you use because your hands are already bleeding. I sent her the first clip from the pump house email account Pops had set up years ago and named WATHERDOG because he thought computers needed dogs too. The upload took 9 minutes. I sat in the cold watching the progress bar crawl while wind rattled the metal roof. Outside, frost melted into drops and fell from the orchard limbs like the trees were quietly counting down. Called back, "This is enough to get the judge's attention. It is not enough to win the war." They said copy the damn signature. They said words, "We need the act." There are more clips. Then pull them, all of them, do not edit. Do not rename except for copies, keep the originals intact. I worked through the morning. At 12:16 a.m., Dean forced the old office window. At 12:23, followed him inside. At 12:41, a light came on in the office. The weather camera outside could not see the desk, but the porch camera caught them leaving with Pop's deed box. Stumbled on the step and papers spilled across the porch. Dean swore, my daughter laughed. That laugh hurt worse than the lock. At 1:08 a.m., another camera picked them up near the packing shed office. This angle was better. The shed window had no curtain. Through the glass, I could see Dean spreading documents on the desk. Stood beside him, comparing something on her phone to a paper. She took a pen from her pocket, practiced strokes in the air, then bent over. The camera did not capture every letter. It did not need to. It captured enough. Her hand moving where my signature later appeared, Dean holding a flashlight over the page, both of them leaning close to examine the result. I paused the clip when lifted the paper and smiled. My little girl had smiled like that when she was 7 and held up her first blue ribbon from the county fair. Pops had picked her up and spun her around, proud as sunrise. That child could sell rain to a fish, he said. He had meant charm. He had not known charm could grow teeth. By noon, I had 12 clips and photographed the system screen with timestamps. I also found a log entry, remote access attempted, failed, 3:12 a.m. The username was DANW. He had known the unit existed. He simply had not known the old password. Pops had used Nora's apple pie recipe as the password hint, and Dean had never once helped peel apples. I was packaging the files when a truck pulled into the service lane. She stepped out alone this time. No Dean, no witnesses, no charity voice. She walked toward the pump house in boots that sank into the mud. Her face was pale, her mouth hard. "I know you're in there," she called. I unplugged the drive and slipped it into my coat. She tried the door, the latch held. "Dad, open up." For one heartbeat, I wanted to. Not because I trusted her, but because I remembered opening every door she ever knocked on. Monsters do not arrive wearing horns. Sometimes they arrive wearing the face you taught to ride a bicycle. "I saw the clip," I said through the wood. Silence. Then she said, almost bored, "Which one?" Which one? Those 2 words did something worse than a confession. They told me there were enough betrayals for her to lose track. I stood inside the pump house, with the storage drive heavy in my pocket, and watched Shadow move across the crack under the door. She was close enough that I could hear her breathing. It was not frightened breathing. It was impatient. "You need to think very carefully," she said. "Anything you took from that system can be challenged. You accessed property under dispute." "It's my property. Not if the transfer stands. You forged it. You can't prove that. I watched you do it." Her shadows stopped. When she spoke again, she had changed voices. The anger disappeared, replaced by the thin, trembling tone she used for audiences. "Dad, I understand you're hurt. I know losing Mom broke something in you. I know the hospital scared you. But you can't keep making accusations because you're afraid of change." There was no audience but me, and still she performed. That was when I realized she had practiced so long she no longer knew where the stage ended. "Why?" I asked. A laugh escaped her, small, ugly. "Why, you really don't know." "No, because you were going to let it rot." I looked at the pump pipes, the muddy boots by the wall, the calendar Pops had left hanging from 2019 because the picture was of a tractor he liked. Rot. She had walked through those trees every fall, eaten fruit from them, posed for engagement photos beneath them, and called the life that fed us decay. "Pops built it for family," she said. "Not for you to sit on forever because you can't let go of dead people. He built it for work. He built it for control. Mom spent her whole life canning apples and smiling through debt because you and Pops worshipped dirt." My throat tightened. "Do not bring your mother into this. She wanted more. You don't know what she wanted." "I know she cried every September." Nora cried every September because her sister died in September. Knew that. Or maybe she had forgotten because grief not useful to her had no value. "You sold her kitchen," I said. "I saved myself from it." The words hung between us. For the first time, I saw the wound under the greed. It did not excuse anything. It simply made the crime. Had not stolen because she loved the orchard too much. She had stolen because she believed the orchard had stolen from her first. "Offered enough to get all of us out," she said. "Me, Dean, the kids, you too, if you would stop being impossible. You locked me out of my home. I protected the deal from your episodes. You forged my name. You abandoned me to trees." I closed my eyes. There it was. A child's accusation wearing an adult's lipstick. She had always resented the orchard because it demanded seasons and attention. It took my mornings, Nora's weekends, Pop's joints. It taught patience to people who wanted applause. "I loved you," I said. "No," snapped. "You loved what stayed. Trees stay, dead wives stay, old men stay in pictures. I was the one who left, and you punished me for it." I almost opened the door, almost, not to forgive her, to tell her I had never punished her for leaving. I had paid her rent when Dean lost his job. I had watched her children every summer. I had given her the front field for her wedding tent and let her complain that the grass smelled like fertilizer. But people who rewrite childhood do not accept footnotes. A car horn sounded from the lane. Dean's truck. Stepped back. "Give me the drive." "No. If you use it, I'll have you declared incompetent before breakfast." "Drive." Her voice dropped. "You think Pop's camera saves you. You don't know what Dean has." "What does he have?" She did not answer. Her shadow moved away. Through the small window, I saw her climb into Dean's truck. He looked toward the pump house and made a phone call. Stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I checked my phone. No service in the pump house. I opened the back panel, slid through blackberry canes, and climbed toward the old ridge path with the drive against my chest. Halfway up the hill, a sheriff's cruiser turned into the orchard. The deputy found me near the ridge path, breathing like my lungs had been packed with wet wool. His name was Owen Pike, and I had known him since he was a boy who stole apples, apologized with tears, then came back the next week to steal more. Now he wore a badge and the careful expression of a man trying not to recognize history. "Mister," he called, "we got a report. From my daughter." He did not answer fast enough. Dean stood by the cruiser with one hand on the open door, acting concerned. Was beside him, arms wrapped around herself. Anyone driving by would have seen a worried couple and an old man in the weeds. That was the power of staging. It made the lie visible first. Owen came closer. They said you may have entered a locked structure and taken equipment. My equipment, property status, is disputed. Did they mention the forged deed? His eyes flickered. Sir, I'm not here to litigate. No, you're here to help them build a record. That landed. Owen looked past me toward Dean. I'm here to make sure everyone is safe. I pulled the drive from my coat. Then keep this safe. Dean moved immediately. That's stolen property. Owen held up a hand. Nobody move. His voice shook perfectly. Dad, please, you're scaring me. I looked at Owen. On that drive are clips of them breaking into the office and copying my signature. Dean laughed. This is exactly the paranoia we documented. Then you won't mind if Deputy Pike logs it as potential evidence. Dean stopped laughing. Owen took the drive slowly, like it might bite. I can't just seize. I'm giving it to you voluntarily, as owner of the system. Dean stepped forward. He is not the confirmed owner. Neither are you, Owen said. For the first time that morning, someone with authority had said no to Dean. It was small, but it changed the air. Notice too, her eyes narrowed. Owen placed the drive in an evidence bag from his cruiser. I'll note chain of custody, no promises. Good enough. It was not good enough, of course. Nothing was. My house was still locked, still had maps, still had her audience. But the drive was no longer only in my hands, which meant they could not accuse me of inventing the footage without accusing the sheriff's office of breathing. Dean recovered first. We still need to address his trespass. Owen turned to him. Against the person named on the deed currently on record. Dean hesitated. The transfer is in process. Then it's not transferred. Stepped in, Deputy, he is medically vulnerable. If he stays here alone and something happens, that's on all of us. There it was again, concern used as a leash. I'm not staying here, I said. I'm going to Bell. Dean's face hardened at its name. Owen opened the cruiser door. I can give you a ride. I have my truck. Your truck's blocked, he toward the lane. Dean had parked sideways across the service road. On purpose, just enough to trap my vehicle without appearing aggressive. I almost admired the precision of it. Almost. Owen looked at Dean. Move it. Dean smiled. Of course. As he walked away, came close enough to whisper. You think this makes you look strong, she said. It makes you look pathetic, dragging police into family business. I kept my eyes on the orchard. You made it business when you sold it. Her mouth twisted. You should have given it to me before I had to take it. That sentence revealed the bottom of her. Not need, not fear. Entitlement so deep she mistook theft for correction. By evening, had the emergency hearing scheduled for the next afternoon. The court would not decide ownership yet, but it could freeze the sale, order document production, and grant supervised access to the orchard. I sat in the motel room with vending machine soup and my phone glowing beside me. Posted again at 8:14 p.m. Please pray for my father. Dementia steals more than memory, it steals trust. Hundreds of people reacted. At 8:22, an anonymous account commented with one sentence. Maybe ask about the camera. The anonymous comment sat under post for exactly 6 minutes before disappearing. 6 minutes was enough. People saw it. Patty from the sent me a screenshot. Sent me 3 question marks. Owen Pike did not text me, but his wife viewed my profile twice, which in small-town language meant the sheriff's office knew the weather had changed. Deleted the post by 9. At 10, Dean called. I let it ring until it stopped, then listened to the voicemail, because sometimes a man reveals more when he thinks he is leaving a performance. Daniel, this has gone too far, he said. You're damaging the kids. Whatever you think you saw, there are explanations. Call me before turns this into something none of us can undo. Something none of us can undo, not the forgery, not the lockout, not the sale. The undoable thing to Dean was being caught. The hearing was held in a courthouse that smelled of old paper and floor wax. Arrived with Dean, Brent, from Family Services, and a doctor I had met once for 9 minutes during discharge. I arrived with my hospital folder and a breathing I could not make steady. The judge, Helen Arroyo, had white hair pulled into a knot and the expression of a woman who had watched families discover money was stronger than blood. She read the filings, looked at, then at Dean's attorney, a polished man named Sutter who spoke as though every syllable had been billed in advance. Sutter argued that had acted under emergency concern. He said I was medically fragile, emotionally unstable, and fixated on a property that had become financially burdensome. He said the sale to would preserve the legacy through adaptive reuse. I hated him most for that phrase. Adaptive reuse sounded like turning a church into a bar and calling it resurrection. Stood when he finished. "Your Honor," she said, "they changed the locks on a man's home while he was hospitalized, attempted to transfer land through documents they have not produced in original form, and initiated sale negotiations with a developer while simultaneously creating a public record of alleged incompetence. We are not here to decide the ultimate merits today. We are here to stop a moving truck before it reaches the cliff." Judge Arroyo looked at me. "Mister, do you understand these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Can you explain what you are asking for?" "My home not be sold by people who forged my name." Lowered her head as if struck. Dean placed a comforting hand on her back. The judge watched them, then turned back to me. "Do you have evidence of forgery?" "Raise the evidence bag copy receipt from the sheriff's office. Security footage from the properties where the station system has been with Deputy Pike. We have partial clips available for review, pending forensic copying." Sutter objected before she finished. "Chain of custody, unauthorized access, edited media, medical condition." He threw phrases like gravel. Judge Arroyo held up one hand. "I will not decide admissibility today. I will decide risk." She signed the temporary order. The sale was frozen, was barred from closing or entering the property, and Dean were ordered to produce original documents within 48 hours. I was granted supervised access to retrieve personal items and inspect security systems. No party was to alter, delete, move, or destroy electronic records. Cried then, not loudly, just enough. Dean stared at the table. Brent whispered something to his attorney and left before the ink dried. Outside the courtroom, followed me to the hallway. "You have no idea what you just did." I turned. She wiped one perfect tear. "Had already advanced money." "How much?" She said nothing. Dean grabbed her arm lightly, warning her. Leaned close to me. "There it is. Debt, of course. Every thief has a hunger, but debt teaches hunger to sprint." Pulled free of Dean. "You think this is about greed. You always think the worst of me." I looked at my daughter, and for one moment I saw the child with apple juice on her chin, demanding the biggest piece of pie because she was small and needed justice. Then the woman in front of me blinked, and the child was gone. "No," I said, "I think the worst of you finally brought paperwork." The court order got me through the gate the next morning. Owen Pike stood beside me while Dean unlocked the new padlock. Would not look at either of us. She kept her phone in her hand, recording until told her that if she wanted documentary evidence of violating the judge's order, she should hold the camera higher. The farmhouse smelled wrong. Every home has a breath. Ours had always smelled of wood smoke, apple skins, coffee, and Nora's lavender soap near the sink. Now it smelled of paint, cardboard, and someone else's candle. The hallway runner was gone. Pop's coat had been removed from the peg by the back door. My books were stacked in boxes labeled Dad Sort. Nora's recipe cards sat in a plastic bin marked Kitchen MISC. I stopped there longer than I should have. Saw and mistook grief for weakness. "We were organizing," she said. "You were erasing." Dean opened the office door. "Let's keep this efficient." The office had been stripped. The old oak desk remained, but the lower drawer where Pops kept the land records was empty. The metal deed box was gone. So were the ledgers, insurance policies, and Nora's red binder of orchard accounts. In their place, Dean had left folders with printed labels facing outward: medical, transfer, consent, sale. It looked orderly, which is often how dishonest people decorate panic. Photographed everything. Owen stood in the doorway, silent. "Where are the originals?" asked. Dean handed her a banker's box. "Certified copies." "Originals. Our attorney has them." Sutter told the court you had them. Dean's jaw flexed. Then they are being couriered. Smiled at the moment. Snapped, stop twisting everything. No, said, twisting is your department. In the kitchen, the changes were worse. The family table was pushed against the wall. The blue curtains had been replaced. On the counter lay brochures for Orchard Retreat, complete with fake watercolor renderings of cabins among pops, apple trees. One caption read, "Where heritage meets luxury." I picked up the brochure and saw my father's face on the mock-up sign. They had used an old photograph of Pops standing beside the tractor. Under it, Founder's Farm Experience. My knees almost buckled. Dean noticed. They wanted to honor him. They wanted to sell him. Owen took the brochure from my hand, his expression darkening. Maybe he had stolen apples from that photograph's trees. Maybe he finally understood this was not a family disagreement with extra paperwork. This was grave robbing with a marketing budget. In the mudroom, I found Nora's red binder shoved behind cleaning supplies. Must have missed it, or Dean had not known what it was. I slid it free. Inside were expense sheets, handwritten notes, deposit records, tax receipts, seasonal crop yields, and taped to the inside cover, a sealed envelope with my name in Nora's handwriting. Saw it before, did. That is personal correspondence, she said quickly. Bag it. Stepped forward. Mom's things belong to family. I held the envelope against my chest. Then it's strange you put her life under kitchen miscellaneous. Her face whitened. Owen cleared his throat. We should continue to the pump house. Dean suddenly became very interested in his phone. The pump house inspection isn't necessary. The order says security systems, said. The system is obsolete. So is perjury, but people keep using it. We went outside. As we crossed the yard, I looked back at the kitchen window. For a second, I imagined Nora standing there, wiping her hands on a towel, watching us walk toward the hill. She had always known where things were hidden. She had always known which silence meant trouble. The envelope in my coat felt warm, though the morning was cold. I opened Nora's envelope in car because the farmhouse had too many ghosts and the motel had too few. Inside was one folded sheet and a small brass key taped to the bottom. Nora's handwriting was steady, blue ink, slanted slightly left the way it did when she wrote slowly. Dani, if you are reading this because I am gone and is being kind, then forgive an old woman for worrying too much. If you are reading this because is being useful, be careful. There are two kinds of children who resent a family place. Some resent the work. Some resent not being worshipped by the work. Has always needed the room to turn toward her when she enters it. The orchard never did. That made it her enemy. I stared at the page until the words blurred. Sat beside me, quiet. Outside, cars moved along Main Street, as if my dead wife had not just reached through paper and put her hand over mine. The letter continued. I found copies of documents in Dean's briefcase last spring. Draft transfers, medical authority expansions, a sample signature page with your name practiced on scrap paper. I confronted. She cried and told me I misunderstood. Then she did something worse. She asked how much of the orchard would be hers if you died before me. I did not tell you because your heart was already tired and because I wanted to believe my daughter could still turn away from the edge. I was wrong. The key is for the old cold room cabinet. Pops kept backups there after the bank flood. I added what I found. If this has become ugly, make it for them. Love. Nora. I laughed once. It came out broken. Make it for them. That was my wife. Gentle with children, patient with customers, lethal with anyone who mistook kindness for blindness. Took a breath. Cold room cabinet. Packing shed behind the apple washer. Is it under the court order? Property access, personal and security inspection. Good, we go now. The cold room had not run in years, but it still held the old apple smell, sweet rot and metal. Dean protested that the area was unsafe, told him to stand somewhere safer, preferably several counties away. Owen did not laugh, but his mouth twitched. The brass key fit, a cabinet Pops had built into the wall. The door stuck at first, then it opened with a sigh. Inside were folders wrapped in plastic, a small external drive, photocopies, and a notebook with Nora's handwriting on the label. CLAA Dean, do not wait. My hands trembled as I opened it. Nora had kept records like a woman preparing for war she prayed would never happen. Dates visited when we were not home. Missing pages from the deed binder. A screenshot of a text from Dean. If we wait for him to die, walks. A bank notice showing an account opened under Orchard Legacy LLC. A draft statement about my cognitive decline, saved months before my hospitalization. Copies of my signature from Christmas cards and checks, placed beside practice attempts. At the back was a printed email from Brent to Dean. Need owner incapacity angle clean before offer goes formal. Daughter must be sole sympathetic face. Even swore. Owen asked to photograph the contents. Agreed, then called the court clerk from the packing shed and requested an emergency status conference. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were bright with anger. Stood outside under the bare apple trees, arms folded, watching us through the doorway. For the first time, she looked not sad, not angry, but afraid. Dean found her and whispered something. She shook her head. He grabbed her wrist. Owen stepped forward. Hands off, the deputy said. Dean released her, smiling too late. That tiny moment shifted another piece of the puzzle. Was guilty, was cruel, but Dean had not simply followed her. He had been steering parts of this machine, maybe more than she wanted to admit. When looked at me, I saw a flash of the girl she had been, not innocent, cornered. Then she turned away and said loudly, "My mother was sick when she wrote those things." My grief went still. "No," I said, "your mother was dying when she finally stopped protecting you." The emergency status conference became the first crack wide enough for the town to see through. Judge Arroyo ordered to disclose all payments, advances, side agreements, and communications with Dean or any entity created to represent the orchard. Brent's attorney objected so hard his neck reddened. The judge listened, then asked one question. Did pay money before verifying undisputed ownership? The attorney looked down. That answer had no words and all the meaning. By evening had documents. Had advanced Dean and $75,000 through a consulting agreement with Orchard Legacy LLC, consulting for heritage transition planning. In plain language, they had been paid to help steal the orchard smoothly. $10,000 had gone to credit cards, $20,000 to Dean's failed equipment business, $15,000 to a private school deposit for their youngest. The rest had moved through accounts like water trying to hide mud. Came to the motel after dark. I saw her through the peephole, alone, no coat, hair loose around her face. She looked younger and older than she had in years. For a moment, I considered not opening. Then I remembered Nora's line, "If is being useful, be careful." I opened with the chain on. She looked at the gap. Really? Yes. Her eyes filled. This time, I could not tell whether it was performance. That uncertainty hurt more than certainty. Dean handled the LLC, she said. Did Dean make you forge my name? She flinched. You don't understand what he was saying to me. That I was going to ruin everything. That you would leave me nothing. I never said that. You never had to. Everything was Pop's. Pop's trees, Pop's house, Pop's rules. Even after he died, you talked about him like he was still sitting at the table and I was just visiting. You were his granddaughter. I was collateral damage. The hallway light buzzed above us. Somewhere down the corridor, a television laughed. What do you want? She herself, if I help, will keep me out of jail. There it was, not apology, bargaining. I can't promise you anything. You're my father. And you locked me out of my home. Her mouth tightened. I was going to make sure you had a place. A facility. A good one. With my own money. She looked away. I closed my eyes. Tell the truth to all of it. Then maybe the truth has room for mercy. She laughed bitterly. You sound like Mom. That's the first kind thing you've said in days. For a second, her face cracked. The woman who had posted prayers and forged signatures vanished, and my daughter stood there raw, scared, and mean with fear. Dean has a recording, she whispered. What recording? He recorded you after Mom died. In the kitchen, you were saying you couldn't do this anymore, that maybe it would be better if the orchard was gone. He says it proves you wanted the sale. I remembered that night. I had sat at the kitchen table with Nora's sweater in my hands, exhausted beyond pride, and said to the empty room that I did not know how to keep breathing in a house she had left. Better if it all burned. Better if the trees stopped asking for spring. Grief says things that criminals later quote. Where is it? Dean has copies. He said if I turned on him, he'd release it and say I manipulated you while you were unstable. Did you? She did not answer. The silence was an answer wearing a shroud. She whispered, I signed some things before Dean got involved. How many? Her eyes lifted to mine, and for once there was no performance. Enough. Down the hall, the elevator dinged. Turned her head sharply. Dean stepped out carrying flowers from the grocery store, smiling like a husband arriving at a hospital room. He said, there you are. She went pale. I shut the door, slid the chain free, and opened it wide enough for Dean to see my phone already recording. Dean's flowers were yellow tulips, Nora's flowers. He held them casually, but the choice was deliberate. That was Dean's talent. Every cruelty wore a ribbon. He glanced at my phone, adjusted his smile, and spoke as though we had all accidentally met at church. Daniel, I'm glad came to talk. Emotions have been high. Stood between us, frozen. I said, interesting flowers. His eyes flicked down, a peace offering. For my dead wife or my frightened daughter. The smile faltered, that's unfair. Good, I'm tired of being fair. The motel hallway seemed too narrow for the three of us and all the dead people standing behind us. Dean looked at, honey, let's go. She did not move. He said again, softer. That softness made my skin crawl. It sounded like the voice he must have used while telling her the orchard was owed to her, that I would never understand, that all she had to do was sign and cry in the correct places. She was about to tell me about your recording, I said. Dean's face changed by half a degree. Enough. There is no recording. Then you won't mind saying that for my phone. He looked at the screen. You don't have consent to record me. We're in a motel hallway. Lower your voice if privacy matters. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, something closer to remembering she still had teeth. Dean stepped toward her. This is your father manipulating you again. I laughed. You put my grief on tape. I documented concerns. You documented a widower talking to an empty kitchen. After which you became increasingly unstable. No, after which you saw a script. He raised his hands. See, this aggression. Turned on him. Stop. Dean stared at her. What? Stop narrating him. For one bright second, she sounded like Nora. Dean's eyes went flat. You need to think about the kids. There it was, the leash he kept behind the flowers. Whispered, I am. He leaned closer. If this collapses, we lose the house, the school deposit, everything. Your father will be fine. Old men always are. They get sympathy. We get consequences. You should have thought of consequences before you forged a deed, I said. Dean rounded on me. You were going to let that land die. You and your sainted father built a prison and called it legacy. Then why did you want it? Because dead things still have value. The words echoed in the hallway, recoiled as if he had slapped her. Maybe greed spoken plainly sounds different when it is not dressed in future plans. My phone kept recording. Dean realized it, a breath too late. He lunged for the phone. I stepped back, but my legs betrayed me. My shoulder hit shoved Dean away with both hands. Don't touch him. Doors opened along the hallway. A man in pants looked out. Patty who had apparently been delivering soup to her aunt 2 rooms down, stepped into view with her own phone raised. Dean lowered his hands slowly. Arrived 9 minutes later because, as she later admitted, she had been parked across the street eating a gas station sandwich and expecting idiocy. Owen Pike arrived 3 minutes after that. Dean tried to call the shove a family misunderstanding. The phones disagreed. Gave a statement in the lobby. Not all of it, not enough to cleanse anything, but enough to turn the knife. She admitted Sadvance. She admitted Dean created the LLC. She admitted the cognitive decline statement had been drafted before my hospitalization. She admitted she practiced my signature, though she claimed Dean pressured her. She said the originals were in Dean's truck safe. Dean called her a liar in front of 2 deputies, Patty, and a vending machine that like it was enjoying justice. Owen impounded the truck. By midnight, they had the safe open. Inside were the original forged deed, the draft incompetency letter, the recorded kitchen clip, and a list of relatives to contact in order. Sympathetic first, skeptical last. At the bottom of the list, beside my brother's name, Dean had written, "Tell him Daniel threatened." Looked at me over the papers. "Now," she said, "we stop playing defense." Requested a private settlement, laughed so hard she had to take off her glasses. "No," she said, "they wanted heritage, let's give them an audience." The County Land Board meeting was already scheduled for Thursday because needed zoning pre-approval for its Orchard Retreat concept. Before the court order, they had expected polite questions about traffic and septic systems. By Thursday evening, the meeting room was so full the fire marshal stood in the hallway wearing the expression of a man who wanted gossip but also exits. Sat in the back with her attorney. Dean was not there. His attorney said he had chosen to avoid inflammatory appearances. Owen said quietly that Dean had chosen to avoid being served in public and failed. Brent stood at the front beside a poster board showing cabins among fake apple blossoms. He used words like preservation, rural charm, multigenerational experience. Behind him, Pop's face smiled from the mock-up sign, stolen twice now, once from a photograph, once from meaning. When public comment opened, stood first. She did not shout, she never had to. "My client is Daniel, current legal owner of Family Orchard. He was hospitalized when unauthorized parties changed locks, created a limited liability company, accepted advance funds from, and attempted to transfer property using signatures now under forensic review." The room rustled. Brent's attorney objected that this was not a courtroom. Agreed cheerfully, "Correct. That is why I'm using smaller words." She played the first clip. On the projector screen, Dean's truck rolled through the orchard gate under moonlight. People leaned forward. His voice came through the room. "If he gets better, we need it signed before he comes home." A woman gasped. Played the packing shed clip next. Dean held the flashlight, bent over the document. The room went so still I could hear the projector fan. Then she played Dean in the motel hallway. "Dead things still have value." Brent's face became a locked door. When finished, she turned to the board. "Has marketed this project using my client's father without consent, negotiated under disputed authority, and paid advance money to people who did not own what they promised. The family is not asking this board to decide criminal guilt. We are asking you not to reward a project rooted in fraud." Patty stood next, then Owen's father, then a retired teacher who remembered Pops donating apples to the school lunch program when the district ran short. One by one, the town became less audience and more witness. Did not speak. She sat with her hands folded, staring at the floor. Brent tried to salvage it, was misled as well. I stood then. My knees hurt, my lungs still felt borrowed, but the room turned toward me, and for once, they were not looking to see if I was confused. They were waiting to hear. "My father planted the first row after coming back from a war he never talked about," I said. "He planted trees because trees don't care what you survived. They ask what you'll do next. My wife kept that place alive when I wanted to quit. My daughter forgot what was given to her and called it a cage. Maybe I helped teach her that by loving land loudly and people quietly, that is on me." Covered her mouths. But quiet love is not permission to steal from it. Grief is not incompetence. Age is not vacancy. And legacy is not a prop for a developer's brochure. No one moved. I looked at Brent. "Take my father's face off your signs." The board voted to table's application indefinitely pending legal resolution. In small-town politics, indefinitely means buried with boots on. Outside, under the parking lot lights, approached me. Her eyes were swollen. For the first time, no one followed her. "I didn't think it would go that far," she said. "That's what people say when they drove the car, but disliked the crash. She wants, like she deserved that. Dean says he'll make sure I go down with him. You probably will. Her face crumpled. I wanted to comfort her. I did not. Mercy without truth is just another locked gate. She whispered, will you ever forgive me? I looked toward the dark road leading back to the orchard. I'll tell you after the deed is clean. The forensic examiner was a woman named Dr. Ward who treated handwriting like a corpse that could still answer questions. Her office had magnifying lamps, angled rulers, and silence sharp enough to cut paper. She examined the original forged deed, my checks, my tax forms, old Christmas cards, and the practice sheets from Dean's safe. Attended with her attorney, she looked as though sleep had stopped visiting. Dean attended by video from his lawyer's office, where he kept leaning out of frame to whisper at someone who did not want to be seen. Dr. Ward spoke without drama. The signature on the transfer document is not authored by Mr. I felt nothing at first, not joy, not relief, just a tired unclenching somewhere behind my ribs. She continued. Several questioned practice signatures found in the seized materials demonstrate progressive imitation. The final deed signature resembles the fourth practice attempt, not Mr.'s natural variation. There is also evidence of guided hesitation and stroke patching. Dean's attorney objected to guided. Dr. Ward looked at him over her glasses. I used the word because it is accurate. The smile was small and vicious. Then came the notary. The deed had been notarized by a woman named, who swore she had witnessed me sign in the farmhouse kitchen the night before my hospitalization. Unfortunately for hospital records placed me in an ambulance bay at that exact time. Unfortunately again, the weather station porch camera showed Dean entering the farmhouse with at 9:12 p.m. and leaving with her at 9:31. I was not there. Was folded before lunch. By evening, she had told investigators that Dean paid her $5,000 and claimed I had approved everything but was too sick to appear on camera. She said, cried the whole time, but handed over my driver's license photocopy. That sentence lodged in me, cried the whole time, not because she stopped, because she continued while crying. The law moved from civil to criminal with a sound like a door bolting shut. Forgery, fraud, elder exploitation, conspiracy, identity theft, attempted unlawful transfer of real property. The words were heavy, but none weighed as much as my daughter's name beside them. Dean was arrested first. He acted offended, then terrified, then important, surrendered the next morning. She asked if I would come. I did not. Instead, I went to the orchard. The gate lock had been removed by court order. My old brass key worked again. The sound it made entering the lock nearly broke me. I walked up the drive slowly. The FOR sale sign was gone, but the holes remained in the fence post. I touched them. Wounds in wood close differently than wounds in people. Sometimes both leave circles. Inside the farmhouse, boxes still lined the hall. I opened the one marked Kitchen MISC and took out Nora's recipe cards. One had apple butter stains along the edge. Her handwriting named ingredients the way some people name prayers. I put the blue curtains back up that afternoon. Badly, Nora would have laughed, then fixed them, then told me I was handsome enough to distract from uneven hems. At sunset, arrived with takeout and paperwork. The temporary freeze is now a formal injunction, she said, is backing away publicly while reserving rights privately. Translation, they want to vanish without admitting they smelled fraud before buying perfume for it. And cooperating partially, her attorney is trying to frame Dean as mastermind. Was he? Set down the food. Do you want the legal answer or the father answer? Both. Legal, Dean drove the scheme and profited aggressively. Father opened the door, handed him the key, and complained when he moved furniture. I looked out at the orchard rows going dark. Can she come back from that? Softened just a little. People come back from worse. They don't always come back to where they started. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time since the hospital. At 2:00 a.m., I woke because the house made a sound I had missed, wind pressing against old wood, asking if I was still there. I answered out loud, yes. 2 weeks later, I found the auction flyer. It was tucked behind the freezer in the packing shed, folded into quarters, edges damp. Auction of equipment and household contents. Family orchard. Scheduled date, the Saturday after expected closing. They had planned to sell the tractors, ladders, apple washer, cold bins, Nora's canning equipment, even Pop's tools listed as assorted vintage farm implements. Assorted. Pop's pruning shears had his initials burned into the handle because he once accused every man in the county of stealing them. Nora's copper jam pot had traveled from her grandmother's kitchen in Ohio. My father's workbench still had the gouge from the day I missed the nail and learned new vocabulary. Assorted is what thieves call objects after scraping the fingerprints off memory. Added the flyer to the evidence packet, I added something else, anger that no longer shook, clean anger, useful anger. The prosecutor, a young man named Thomas Reed, met me in the courthouse conference room. He wore nervous compassion and a tie with tiny ducks on it. He explained plea possibilities, victim impact statements, restitution, the difference between what feels just and what can be proven. I listened. Then I asked if would go to prison. He folded his hands. It depends on cooperation, prior history, and judicial discretion. Dane, more likely. And his mouth tightened. Civil exposure, possibly regulatory, criminal intent is harder. Of course it was. Rich men rarely forge signatures themselves. They build rooms where desperate people do it and call the rent consulting. Wrote me a letter from her attorney's office, 3 pages, no excuses at first, which made me keep reading. She wrote about being jealous of trees, about hearing Nora praise my patience with soil and wondering why I had none left for her restlessness, about Dean telling her she deserved compensation for a childhood of second place, about the first time she my signature and threw up afterward, about the second time when she did not. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in Nora's recipe box because I did not know where else to put a daughter who was both guilty and still mine. The orchard needed work. Theft does not pause weather. Frost warnings came hard that month, and I spent 3 nights lighting smudge pots with Owen, Patty's brother, and 2 old pickers who heard I was short-handed and arrived without being asked. The weather station clicked and blinked above us, measuring cold with bureaucratic indifference. At dawn after the 3rd frost, I climbed the hill to check the camera. From there, the orchard spread below in rows silvered by ice and sunrise. The farmhouse stood small and stubborn. The packing shed looked tired. The world had not become safe. It had simply become mine again. The weather station housing was cracked. Pops had patched it with electrical tape years ago. I ran my thumb over the tape and laughed. The man had overbuilt everything except the parts he intended to outlive by spite. I replaced the storage drive with a new one and backed up the old footage in 3 places. Insisted. Trust is earned, she said, stealing my mug's phrase, but redundancy is notarized. That afternoon, I placed a handwritten sign at the gate. Not for sale. Under it, in smaller letters, I wrote, not confused either. By evening, someone had taken a picture. By morning, it was everywhere. Comments poured in, but this time not under grief performance. Under the orchard's stubborn little sign, people shared memories of Pops giving them apples, Nora slipping extra jars into baskets, me fixing a wagon wheel in the rain. The story was changing hands again. This time, I did not let go. Asked to see the orchard before sentencing. Her attorney called me. I said no. Then I walked through the north rows, saw the tree had planted in 5th grade leaning crooked by the fence, and hated how memory kept voting against self-respect. I agreed to 1 hour, supervised, no dean, no phones. She arrived in a plain gray coat, hair unpinned, face bare. Owen walked 10 paces behind because court conditions required it. Looked smaller without performance, not harmless, just smaller. We started at the gate. She stared at my sign, not confused either. Too much. No, her mouth trembled. Pops would have loved it. He would have made it bigger. We walked in silence past the early galas, the trees still dark with winter. Touched a branch and pulled her hand back as if the bark had accused her. I used to think they were watching me, she said. They were trees. I know, she swallowed, but everyone acted like they mattered more than what I wanted. What did you want? She gave a short laugh. At 12, a dad at my recital who didn't smell like diesel. At 17, money for college that didn't come with a speech about harvest debt. At 38, proof that leaving didn't make me less important. I stopped. You were important. You didn't say it in a language I understood. That was unfair. It was also true enough to wound. Love can be real and still badly translated. I should have said it better. She looked at me, startled. I continued, before Mercy turned stupid. But you should have asked, instead of stealing. Tears slid down her face. She did not wipe them for the camera. There was no camera near enough to matter unless you counted the one on the hill. I hated Mom sometimes, she whispered, for staying, for acting like the orchard was a marriage instead of a business. Then she got sick, and I hated her for making me feel guilty. Then she died, and I hated you because you still had something to hold on to. Nora knew. She always knew. We reached the crooked tree. The little metal tag still hung from its branch. CLARE, 5th grade, County Arbor Day. The letters were faded. Pops had made the tag himself. Covered her mouth. He never took it down, she asked. No. I thought he forgot. Pops forgot birthdays, dentist appointments, and where he put hammers. He did not forget trees. She cried then, not softly, not prettily. It came up from somewhere old and mean and ashamed. I stood beside her because a father's body remembers the shape of comfort even when the heart hesitates. I don't know how to fix this, she said. You don't fix it. You tell the truth, take what comes, and stop asking the people you hurt to make it hurt less. Before she left, she turned toward the hill. Was the camera on today? Yes. A small, ruined smile crossed her face. Good. At sentencing, 3 weeks later, stood before Judge Arroyo and told the truth without blaming Dean first. She blamed him second, which was progress, not sainthood. She received probation, restitution, community service, and a suspended sentence tied to cooperation. Dean received prison time after prosecutors tied him to the notary payment and advance, lost her commission and took a plea, settled civil claims, and paid enough to repair what they tried to brand. None of it gave me back the daughter I thought I had. But justice is not a time machine. It is a fence rebuilt straighter than before. Spring came late. The first blossoms opened on a Wednesday morning, shy pink against branches that had looked dead a week before. Pops would have said he told us so, though no one had argued with him. Nora would have cut 3 branches for the kitchen and pretended the tree volunteered. I stood in the orchard with pruning cuts healing under my fingers and listened to bees worry the air. The place did not feel rescued. It felt recovering. There is a difference. Rescue is dramatic. Recovery is repetitive. You fix a latch. You call the bank. You answer letters. You wake up angry, make coffee, and still check the irrigation because trees do not care whether your daughter betrayed you. So restitution payments began in April. Small amounts, automatic deposits with no message attached. She was working at a community food warehouse as part of her service. Patty saw her there once and reported she was wearing sneakers, stacking boxes, and not crying where anyone could admire it. That sounded promising. Dean wrote once from prison. I did not open it, offered to burn it ceremonially. I told her to file it. She said those were not mutually exclusive, but the settlement included removal of all promotional material using Pop's face and the orchard name. Brent sent a formal apology drafted by counsel. It contained words like regret and misunderstanding and process failures. I framed it in the packing shed bathroom where apologies of that kind belong. The weather station got a new casing. I installed a second camera, then a third. Not because I expected betrayal around every corner, but because trust, once broken, leaves behind practical habits. Owen helped run the wire. He looked embarrassed when I paid him in cash and 2 jars of Nora's apple butter from the last batch she made. You don't have to, he said. Yes, I do. Pop said unpaid work turns friends into relatives, and relatives cause lawsuits. He laughed so hard, he nearly dropped the ladder. One afternoon, I found a package at the gate, no return address. Inside was the brass key to the cold room cabinet and a note from. I kept it too long, I'm sorry. No plea for forgiveness, no explanation, just the key returned. I walked it back to the cold room and placed it on the hook inside the cabinet. Then I sat on the floor among apple crates and let myself miss my daughter, not the woman who forged my name, not the child I invented to soften her. The real, complicated and wounded and responsible. Missing someone does not mean inviting them back to the table. Sometimes it means admitting there was a table once. In May, the county school asked if they could tour the orchard again. I nearly said no. Then I remembered Pops opening the gate for every child who wanted to know why apples did not grow in supermarkets. So I said yes. 32 children came with clipboards. One asked why the sign said not for sale. I told him because some things are worth more than money. He asked if that meant no one could ever buy the apples. I told him apples were different. He seemed unconvinced. Children are excellent lawyers. At the end of the tour, I showed them the weather station. I did not tell them everything. I said it watched for frost, storms, and coyotes. One girl looked at the camera and asked, "Does it catch bad people too?" I thought about at the gate, Dean in the office, Brent's maps, Nora's letter, Pop's stubborn red light blinking through fog. Yes, I said, if bad people forget the truth has good eyesight. I found Pop's letter in June, tucked behind the weather station manual in a drawer I had opened 100 times and never properly searched. The envelope was yellowed, addressed to whoever keeps the hill blinking. That was my father's idea of estate planning, vague enough to annoy lawyers, exact enough to find the right fool. Inside was a single page written in his square, stubborn hand. If you are reading this, the camera finally mattered. I sat down before my knees decided for me. Pops continued. People get sentimental about land because they do not have to wake up at 4 for it. Land is not loyal, trees are not grateful. A farm will take every ounce you have and still drop hail on you in August. So if somebody wants to leave, let them. Do not chain children to soil and call it heritage. But if somebody tries to steal it, bury them in paperwork. I laughed until I cried. He wrote about the weather station then, how he installed audio not because of coyotes, but because he once caught a neighbor moving boundary stakes and could not prove what was said. How he hid backup storage in the pump house and cold room. How he told Nora but not me because, as he put it, Danny trusts family like a dog trusts thunder not to scare him twice. The last paragraph slowed my breathing. If ever turns hard, remember she was born hungry for applause and terrified of being ordinary. That makes a person easy to love and dangerous to disappoint. Love her if you can, stop her if you must. Do not confuse the two. I folded the letter and sat with it until the afternoon heat pushed through the office window. Pops had seen more than I knew. Nora had seen more than I wanted. I had seen only what love allowed me to survive. That evening, called. Her name on the screen still had the power to move the room around me. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Dad. Her voice was careful, stripped of polish. Yes. I had my first counseling session today. I said nothing because praise too early is another kind of pressure. She asked me what I wanted from you, laughed once, embarrassed. I said I wanted you to say I was still your daughter. The orchard outside the window shifted in warm wind. Leaves whispered against each other like people deciding whether to forgive. You are still my daughter, I said. She began to cry. I waited. After a while she asked, am I allowed to visit? Not soon, not to ask for anything, just to walk. I looked at Pop's letter on the desk. I said, with conditions. I know. No Dean, no phone posts, no business talk, no keys. I know. And you start at the crooked tree. She cried harder then, but this time the sound did not ask me to fix it. After we hung up, I walked to the hill. The weather station blinked in the dusk. Below, the orchard stretched in green rows, not innocent, not ruined, simply alive. I placed Pop's letter in the metal case with a copy of Nora S. Let the hill keep all witnesses together. Before closing the case, I added my own note. To whoever keeps this place next, cameras catch thieves, but silence helps them. Speak sooner than I did. Then I locked it. For the first time in months, The click sounded less like defense and more like peace. The first public market after the scandal should have been a disaster. That is what I expected. People are curious about pain until it asks them to buy peaches. I pictured whispers, pity, phones lifted behind cider cups. I nearly cancelled twice. Patty threatened to stand at the gate with a sign that said buy APPLES or leave Daniel alone. Said it was legally questionable but emotionally persuasive. Owen offered traffic cones. The old pickers arrived before dawn with coffee and no questions. By 9, cars lined the road. They came for apples, yes, but also for proof, not proof of fraud. That had already been served in court, stamped, posted, and chewed over at every kitchen table in the county. They came to see whether the orchard looked like a crime scene or a home. I gave them neither. I gave them work. Kids carried baskets. Grandmothers argued over cider donuts. A man from 2 towns over asked if the camera tour was included, and Patty told him the only thing being exposed that day was his cheapness if he did not buy jam. I laughed for the first time without hearing it break halfway through. At noon, arrived. The market quieted in waves. She stood at the gate wearing jeans, a plain shirt, and no makeup. Owen saw her and moved closer. I shook my head once, not away, just watch. Held a small envelope. She walked to the table where I was weighing apples. I can leave, she said. You can start at the crooked tree. Her face crumpled, but she walked through the rows alone. No one followed, no one applauded. Good. Repentance should never be given an audience before it has learned to survive without one. She stayed 20 minutes. When she returned, she placed the envelope on the table. Restitution receipt, she said, and a letter for you. You don't have to read it. I know. A boy interrupted us by asking whether the red apples were sweeter than the green ones. Stepped back. I answered him. Life, rude and merciful, continued. Before she left, looked toward the hill. Is the weather station still recording? Yes. Good, she said. I think I need places that don't believe me just because I cry. That was the closest thing to wisdom I had heard from her in years. I watched her walk away. I did not call her back. Some gates open slowly, some only open from one side. Some should stay closed until the person outside stops rehearsing. At sunset, after the market emptied and the tables were folded, I climbed the hill with a basket of bruised apples. The weather station blinked. Below me, the farmhouse glowed in the soft orange light. The gate stood open, chained back to the post, not because I trusted everyone, but because fear no longer got to decide the shape of my welcome. I thought of Pops planting trees after war, Nora hiding evidence beside recipes, crying under her crooked tree, Dean behind bars learning that dead things still testify, Brent searching for another heritage to package, billing like a thunderstorm, Owen carrying an evidence bag with hands gentle enough to save a family from itself. The orchard had survived because dead men overbuild, dying women pay attention, and old cameras do not care who cries. I placed one apple on the weather station's metal base. For you, Pops. The wind moved through the rows, and for a moment, the leaves sounded like 100 people turning pages. I went back down before dark. The gate was still open when I reached it. I stopped, touched the post where the sold sign holes had faded but not vanished, and decided I would not replace the wood. Some scars are warnings, some are maps. Some remind you that being locked out is not the end of a story if someone somewhere left the truth recording. Behind me, the red light blinked on the hills. Ahead of me, the porch light waited. I walked home.